Good evening. I'm Steve Johnson. I'm the director of the Seawolf Debate Program for the University of Alaska Anchorage. That was an easy crowd. I like that. One of the challenging aspects of my job is that my personal convictions are often associated with the topics that we debate. For example, at last year's exhibition debate with Harvard, I was accused by different people on the same day of being ignorant of the plight of victims of firearm violence and of failing to recognize the importance of the Second Amendment. I am neither of those things. It should come as no surprise then that for the topic that we're debating tonight, I've received a fair amount of grief. Some with whom I've spoken believe that we chose this motion because I'm bitter that debate does not receive the same level of attention and funding as does sports. And I'll admit that I'm still waiting for UAA to break ground on the Alaska Airlines Debating Center. But that's not the reason that we're debating this motion tonight. The reason we're debating this motion tonight is the same reason that we debate motions at all: to honor the process of collective decision-making through considered argument. The ability to engage in reasoned discourse is a lot like physical fitness. If you don't use it, you lose it. And given what often passes for debates in our society, we could all use a little exercise. So consider tonight your weekly workout in deliberative democracy. Whether you support or oppose competitive athletics, your presence here tonight suggests that you are committed to better understanding issues from a variety of perspectives, which in turn speaks to your willingness to keep your mind open. That's as important to understanding complex issues of public policy as choosing the right running shoes or the best tennis racket is to becoming the best athlete you can be. The motion for this evening's debate is that no public funds should go to support competitive athletics in public education. In his State of the State address in January, Governor Sean Parnell called upon our legislators to make 2014 the education session for the Alaska legislature. He did so for good reason. From basic questions of funding levels for our public education system to the more controversial issues of whether public funds should go to support private and religious education, there was much to consider. Fundamentally, though, these questions come down to money: how much there is and who should get it. Our choice of motion for this year's exhibition debate is no different. We wanted to provide a fresh and hopefully useful perspective on our priorities in American public education. In her 2013 article in The Atlantic, Amanda Ripley wrote, "As states and districts continue to slash education budgets, as more kids play on traveling teams outside of school, and as the globalized economy demands that children learn higher order skills so that they can compete down the line, it's worth reevaluating the American sporting tradition. If sports were not central to the mission of American public education, then what would be?" America is unique among countries around the world for its infatuation with competitive sports. And don't get me wrong, I know that sports fanatics are everywhere, but we take it to a whole other level with our commitment to including these sports as part of our public education system. So Ripley's questions are relevant. Should our schools devote so much to fielding competitive teams? Or are such endeavors a distraction from the primary mission of what should be our public education system? Hopefully tonight's debate will shed some light on this question. And we have some very skilled advocates to interrogate this motion tonight. Speaking in support of the motion are Sam Ward-Packard and Sisenu Woldemariam from Yale University. Sam and Sisenu are members of the most successful intercollegiate debating program in the United States, the Yale Debate Association. Their contributions to Yale's success are hard to overstate. Sam is the reigning U.S. University's debating champion and won 12 preliminary and elimination rounds of a possible 14 to end up as a semifinalist at this year's World Universities Debating Championships in Chennai, India. Having watched him in that semifinal round, I'm still convinced that he should have gone through to finals. His partner, Sisenu, made it to the quarterfinal of Worlds and was finalist with Sam in the 2013 North American Debating Championships. And though I've never had the chance to actually see Sisenu in action, my debaters are prone to gush about his eloquence when they describe his debating to me. Opposing the motion and representing UAA are Matt Stinson and Brittany Bennett. Both of these individuals are longtime members of the Seawolf Debate Program and share a similar story of how they came to be debaters. In 2010, with no prior competitive debate experience, they met as opponents in the final round of the Cabin Fever Debates. That's UAA's intramural debating tournament. Matt and his partner won that round, but I don't think Brittany holds a grudge. Their journey from those humble beginnings to represent UAA at national and international debating competitions speaks volumes about the power of academic debating to train individuals in the skills of critical thinking and reasoned advocacy. Both graduated from UAA in December and plan to continue their academic careers. Brittany was just admitted to a master's program in natural resources and environment at the University of Michigan, and Matt is spending his free time studying for the LSAT in preparation for attending law school. Tonight's debate will be modeled roughly after the type of debate that happens in international intercollegiate competition. We'll begin with a series of speeches by the proposition and the opposition to lay out their best arguments for and against the motion. During those 8-minute speeches, you'll hear a bell at 1 minute in and 1 minute remaining. Those bells indicate that points of information may be asked by the opposing side. Points of information are brief interjections from the opposing side, and they may take the form of a question or a brief argument. Keep in mind that the decision whether or not to take a point of information rests solely with the discretion of the speaker holding the floor. So you may at times see debaters say, "Not at this time," or simply wave their opponents down. They're not being rude. Part of what's expected of them is that they manage their time effectively and that they interact appropriately with their opponents. Following the constructive speeches, we're going to open the floor to speeches from you, to hear what you have to say. We'll call for those in the audience members who wish to speak in favor of or against the motion to come down front and literally have their moment in the spotlight. We'll do that for about 20 minutes, or until we've had a chance to hear a variety of opinions, and then we'll return to the debaters for a 5-minute summary from each side to close the debate. Finally, we'll conclude this evening with our version of a division of the House, wherein we'll have the opportunity to express our sentiments about whether or not we support or oppose the motion. A couple of notes will help you enjoy tonight's debate a little bit more. First, you'll see behind me on the screen projected here a poll of the audience's sentiments before the debate begins. If you haven't yet done so, grab your phone, text a message to the number 22333, and one of those codes corresponds with either your agreement, your disagreement with, or your uncertainty about the motion. If you'll do that now, we'll capture a sense of what the audience's attitude is going into the debate. We're going to repeat that process at the end of the debate and reopen that poll to give you a chance to once again voice your opinion about the motion. And that's the way that we're going to decide who won or lost tonight's debate, based upon the amount of change that the arguments made by each of the debaters caused in the audience as they were watching. And I would ask, once you've registered your opinion, if you would also take a second to silence your cell phones and make sure that they don't go off during the debaters' speeches. We'd much appreciate it. One of the unique things about British parliamentary debating, or the style of debate in which we typically participate, is that it loves audience interaction. The traditional way to do this, if you've ever seen a debate from the House of Commons, broadcast, for example, on C-SPAN, you might know that the way that we do this is to pound on the table or to pound on something near you, preferably something inanimate, and say, "Hear, hear." It's a good time to practice that now so you are comfortable doing it, so pound on something and say, "Hear, hear." If there is some point that the debaters are making, some argument that they articulate, or some piece of evidence that particularly resonates with you, by all means let them know by saying "hear, hear" during the debate. They'll appreciate it, and it helps get you involved in the audience to let the debaters know what whether or not they're being successful with their efforts.
Hear, hear.
The final note I would give you is this. Keep in mind that the goal of academic debating is to thoroughly test the question. The debater's role is to mount the most vigorous defense of the position that's been assigned to them. In other words, don't assume that the debaters making the arguments hate sports or want to shortchange academics. The arguments made by individual speakers may or may not reflect their personal convictions. There are a number of groups and individuals that deserve our recognition for helping us produce this evening's event. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors: Alaska Airlines, the Hotel Captain Cook, KLEF FM 98.1, UAA's College of Arts and Sciences, the UAA Concert Board, and the Department of Journalism and Communication. Could you join me in saying thanks to those folks for helping us out? I would also like to say thanks to all of you, and to encourage you to continue to support programs like ours. In addition to our competitive team, the Seawolf Debate Program has a pretty robust service agenda, hosting tournaments for high school and middle school debaters, coaching those students to excellence, helping to establish debating clubs in Anchorage and Alaska schools, and starting this summer, offering trainings to empower K-12 teachers to incorporate academic debating into their classrooms. One terrific way to support our efforts is through the Pick, Click, Give program. When you file for your PFD and choose to pick, click, and give, your gift in any amount will be matched 1-to-1 thanks to ExxonMobil. If you donate $500 or more, you can designate your gift to a specific program, like the UAA Seawolf Debate Program. If you donate $1 million or more, I'll let you name the new debating center that they're going to build for me. In all seriousness, your gift would go to support our outreach efforts, so we would use that to magnify the impact that we have and hopefully bring other students into what we believe is one of the most terrific academic programs for teaching critical skills and advocacy that can be offered to students. So we would encourage you to help us support that. With that then, I am pleased to call this House to order and to call upon the first speaker from the proposition to speak on behalf of the motion that stands in his name. Hear, hear.
Thank you. To devote ourselves to the pursuit of athletic perfection while the needs of thousands, tens of thousands of American students go ignored is to ignore our own most basic responsibilities. To devote millions of dollars to building new stadiums and statues in honor of the coaches who triumph within them, while our schools crumble, is to build monuments to our own irresponsibility. It is because of the limitations inherent in the systems through which education is funded. It is because of the problems that we must confront in our public education system today that Sam and I stand in proud support of today's proposition. This House believes that no public funds whatsoever should go to support high school athletics. Towards that end, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be advancing three main lines of argumentation. First, I'm going to be explaining to you why it is that athletics, if anything, diminish the quality of education offered in our public schools. Second, I'm going to explain to you how it is that those benefits which athletics do offer, and we do acknowledge that they exist, are often directed towards those who are most already privileged within the community and ignore many of the most vulnerable, those who are most deserving of our attentions. Last, I'm going to explain how it is that athletics in our high schools often promote harmful cultural norms and are therefore not deserving of our further monetary support. First, and perhaps most important, I think, however, is the manner in which athletics diminish the quality of instruction, both curricular and otherwise, within our schools. This takes place at two key levels. First, insofar as athletics tend to promote actively harmful behaviors, and second, insofar as resources are zero-sum. That is to say, when we spend money on athletics, every dollar that we spend ensuring that our running backs can move that much quicker, that our batters can swing that much harder, is a dollar that we're not using to make sure that other kids can read, write, and do math. First, however, I want to explain why it is that, if anything, athletics actively promote harmful norms. We think that this occurs at three key levels. First, we think that they take away administrative focus from what really matters, ensuring that the teachers are doing their job and ensuring that they have all the resources that they need in order to do their vital work. We think that it's problematic often when athletics results in lowering standards and encouraging cheating among athletes. Why? Because when we require them to pass in order to play, what generally tends to happen isn't athletes stepping up their academic game, rather it's teachers being pressured, often by the very administration that should be supporting their efforts to teach, to simply lower the bar. That way they can receive that further success visually. We think that perhaps most problematic, however, is the manner in which athletics take up time, vital time, instructionally, both in school and out. We think that when students are spending hours a day during the school day, that's already too crammed full of other instruction, to work on their sport, we think that takes away from vital educational goals. We think, moreover, when they stay at school for hours and hours afterwards in order to practice, that takes away from time that they could be devoting to other, more important pursuits. Do we think that the goals promoted by athletics are valuable? Yes, but not at this cost. Go ahead.
Are competitive athletics so harmful that you would ban them across the board, including clubs?
What we think is that there is a significant difference between athletic clubs insofar as they're organized and supported primarily by the students, and athletic organizations such as varsity sports teams. We think that the level of commitment that is demanded from those varsity sports teams, the level in which they affect the school's culture, and the resources that they draw away from other more worthy pursuits are what make them problematic, not just the fact that kids are playing football. More objectionable, however, is what we think is a way that these activities draw away resources that could be used on more important goals. Let's look at this quite simply. Every time that we decide to spend money on these pursuits is a time we're deciding not to spend money on doing simple things like paying our teachers, like buying textbooks, then making sure that we're not having 50 kids to a classroom. Are athletics valuable? Sure, but not to such an extent as to be worthy of that cost. Look at the myriad difficulties that teachers face today. They're overworked, class sizes across the country skyrocketing. They're often underqualified, not receiving enough training, and in fact, many school teachers, because they're not being offered the degree of pay and compensation that their sacred task demands, are being drawn from in the United States in comparison to other countries such as Singapore, Finland, South Korea, and others that generally receive top rankings internationally, being drawn from the bottom third of their own high school graduating classes as opposed to the top third in their other nations. We think they're seeing an extremely high turnover rate among teachers because they get burnt out when they're forced to teach far more kids than is reasonable, where the resources stretch thinner than ever before. All of these are problems that could be better addressed if we weren't spending millions and millions of dollars on high school athletics. We could do more to train our teachers. We could do more to pay our teachers. We could do more to give them the support that they deserve. And in doing so, we can ensure that our students are receiving a higher quality of instruction than they do in the status quo, the kind of instruction that they too deserve. No thank you. Second, however, I want to explain why we think that the benefits that you do get from athletics programs, and we do acknowledge that they exist, are often denied to the students who are most vulnerable and already most underprivileged. We think that the kind of students who generally play varsity and other sort of school-supported high school athletics are those who tend to have time, the kids who don't have to worry about working a job to help support their family, the kind of kids who don't have to worry about trying to take care of their little brothers and sisters at home because mom's pulling 3 different shifts. We think that you don't get the kids playing these sports who are ostracized from the community, who are unsociable, who are unshy, and we think it's highly perverse that schools should devote such massive quantities of resources to an activity which excludes these most vulnerable aspects of the population. We think that athletics can do good. They can teach devotion. They can teach discipline. They can teach teamwork. However, these are all goods that can be attained through other goals. We don't think that it matters whether a student is learning discipline through playing the violin or through playing football. We think that the lessons that you get from athletics can be derived from numerous other forms of activity. And we think that, if anything, schools should try and support and fund other forms of extracurricular activity that everyone can access equally, that aren't nearly as exclusionary as high school athletics tend to be. And moreover, that are creative rather than competitive, because we think that the sort of lessons in competition that you get from high school sports, I'll take you in a moment, aren't necessarily all that useful in the real world, because generally speaking, you're not going to be dealing with situations where you can easily measure your goals and easily measure successes in the real world. You're going to have to deal with situations where it's not just a question of scoring the most baskets, or winning the most runs, or rushing the most yards, but you have to try and create something for yourself and figure out your own path. We think that other forms of endeavor are far better at teaching these lessons than high school sports. Go ahead.
There are many families out there who cannot afford to drive their children out to club sports after they get off from work and cannot afford to pay the excessive costs of club athletics. High school athletics allow those kids who are underprivileged to participate because that's at their school where they're already at.
What we think is that given the fact that when it comes to varsity athletics, it's not a simple question of whether some students can play varsity athletics or not, but whether students can play varsity athletics or not at the cost of other activities, the trade-off is simply not worth it. Every time we spend on these, we're taking away from something else. Thirdly and finally, however, I want to explain to you why we think that athletics tend to promote bad cultural norms. Why? Because there's already enough of an influence within our general culture to value the body above the mind being directed towards the youth. We think that, if anything, in schools, kids should be getting the opposite message. The idea that they're useful because of their intellect. We think that there needs to be a countervailing voice within our communities against a society which says that athletes are the only people worth admiring, that actors, singers, dancers are the only people that worth admiring. And we think that if schools fail to provide that voice, then they are abnegating one of their chief responsibilities. At the point where schools, by devoting such a large proportion of their resources to athletics, abdicate that responsibility, we think that they are failing to do their duty to these students. We think it's essential to create students who in the long run are going to be effective members of our democracy, who are going to be able to develop the skills in the long run to give back economically, politically, and otherwise to their communities. And we think that can only happen with a maximal efficacy at the point where varsity sports no longer receive the funding that they do. We are proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just heard a tirade of fallacies, of inaccuracies, of downright untruth regarding the role of competitive athletics and helping people and advancing them. And although I like the speaker that went before me, and I think that his skills and his oratory are nearly as handsome as he himself is when I look at him, though he would want me to devalue this, I have to stand opposed to this motion because they present to you a fallacy. There is not a separation between our academics and a separation between our competitive athletics. Time and time again, study after study have shown that any academic pursuits are enhanced by taking part in competitive athletics. So if we want to give these students the best education possible, if we want to give them real skills that are going to benefit their lives, then you have to stand on side opposition, and I stand alongside you. Now, before I go into my three main points about why publicly fund athletics, I'm going to talk about why we publicly fund anything, and then the benefits to these students, and particularly at-risk populations, I'm going to address something that came out about the existence of club sports, the existence of these other athletics forms being able to meet the need that people would have in competitive athletics. Because that's just not true. The problem with the European model in club sports is that you lose out on the academic component being linked to the activity, which means there is no minimum GPA requirement for you to compete in your sport, which means that there is no mandatory attendance for you to do well in your sport, which means that what you're left with is a coach that was coaching a private team that is going to use the motivation of sports to prioritize winning over academics rather than partnering with your school, enhancing the curriculum, and making sure that students get the best education possible. So that falls. And also the comparison to European schools outperforming the United States, it varies by state to state. Massachusetts does just as well in mathematics as South Korea and Finland, whereas Mississippi is a little bit more like Trinidad and Tobago. There's other things to work on. The common denominator is not athletics. All right, so why do we publicly fund these athletics? We publicly fund them for two reasons, and the same reasons why we fund anything as a public. The first reason is that it provides clear benefits to those in need. As caretakers of the next generation, we have a moral mandate to provide students with the best education possible, the best specialized education possible to meet their needs to enhance their learning. Secondarily, it provides benefits that reverberate throughout the community, because although this 1% of Anchorage School District's budget goes to competitive athletics, and although it starts with the 1/4 of the student body that we are benefiting most directly, it reverberates and concentric circles go out that benefits the community writ large. I'm going to show you just those reasons why, and you are all going to applaud, and we are all going to text and say we vote opposition. So, on individual benefits, the physical benefits are already there. They're obvious about getting the exercise in order to overcome obesity and diabetes, things that are plaguing our country. Some other studies that came up from the Department of Education show that students who compete in these athletic programs are 49% less likely to use drugs, 37% less likely to become teen parents, 25% less likely to smoke cigarettes. Furthermore, beyond physical health, it showed benefits to their mental health, which completely contradicts what you were hearing out of the last speaker. The University of Northern Iowa showed a study that there were lower rates in both short-term and long-term depression for students that competed in high school sports. It helps your body, it helps your mind, it helps them. Moving on to academics, because this is where we got the most ridiculous claims. From the study of the Journal of Educational Leadership, there are higher GPAs by far on average for students who compete in athletics in their high schools, and in fact they miss 50% less class days than students who are not participating in these. And the study for the Journal of Youth and Society shows they are more likely to become enrolled in college, they are more likely to graduate from college. And I'm not just talking about scholarships, which are real and which provide ways for people from all walks of life to go to a university and get an education. I'm talking about anybody that competes in sports in high school. It is a sound investment for their future, and also real-world skills. Before I answer this POI, It's been shown by the Center for Social and Behavioral Research that not only are these students more politically active, but they earn 12 to 33% more averagely in their wages. So that sounds like a very direct benefit.
So these are all arguments, however dubious, for why athletics are good in their own right. Can you explain to me why it's better that we spend money on athletics at the point where in spending money on athletics, we're taking away from the money we spend on other pursuits?
That 1% for the Anchorage School District is well spent on athletic programs within our city. Whatever percentages we have for our school districts are well spent in athletics because they enhance these education programs, and without them we would just have club sports with no education component, pitting sports with our culture that loves sports against academics. They would make everything worse for these students. So, on to the point about community benefits. Beyond greater civic engagement, it's shown that students that participated in high school sports are more likely to volunteer. They're more likely to participate in their communities, in these activities, shown by a national survey of giving, volunteering, and participating. So that's the first community benefit that reverberates to all of us, because when we invest in these students that need this investment, they invest back in us. Secondarily, it's found to decrease crime. This affects you, this affects anyone that lives in this community. Studies that were done in Washington, D.C., and studies in Chicago showed marked decreases in criminal activity, marked decreases in arrest or any encounter with the justice system for these youth, and marked decreases in gang participation and gang violence. And what explains these occurrences? What explains the benefits that resulted from this? It's because students were able to come alongside and form lasting bonds with these coaches, mentorships with adults that they could trust. It didn't matter what neighborhood you were from, it didn't matter what your background, and thank God it didn't matter how you were parented. If you could get and have a mentorship with someone who's going to treat you well and treat you fairly and help you along in your life. And furthermore, when you are part of a team, you don't need to feel as much to be a part of that gang in your neighborhood. When you're a part of that team, part of that community, you belong, and you spend more time doing that, less time robbing places, less time committing violent crimes. In fact, the Becoming a Man Sports Edition program in Chicago that was evaluated in 2013 by the University of Chicago Crime Lab showed that students that were at risk, students that had already had that criminal record, students that had already been involved in these activities, when paired with these mentors, when paired with these coaches, we're able to go and quit committing crime, for one thing, which is good. I mean, we want less crime. And we're able to focus better on their studies and the rest of their academic pursuits writ large. Sure.
Given that the only way you could hope to devote yourself to something like the high school football team is if you're one of the kids who doesn't have to spend hours after school every day working to support your family or look after your younger siblings, it seems to me like it very much does matter what kind of neighborhood you come from and what kind of parenting you're getting.
Yeah, it does matter on the neighborhood. I'm wondering what neighborhoods you're thinking that I'm saying that crime were decreased writ large, like in the heart of Washington, D.C. and Chicago. But furthermore, I'm going to talk to you about how it serves these at-risk populations, because as my partner already brought up in a POI, not only are club sports cost prohibitive, even though they're valued by our culture. Not only is transportation difficult for these students in order to get out of their neighborhoods and travel safely and not have to walk back at home, but the best part about this is you provide the transportation, you provide the foundation, you provide the mentorship, and you're able to transport kids there during peak hours of when criminal activity would have taken place, when gangland activity would have taken place. You are giving them a hobby. I love hobbies, we all love hobbies, and they benefit especially uniquely in the arena of sports and in the arena of this competition. So why should you side with us, and why should you side with our house? It's because we've shown you that the reason to support this is the reason that we support anything. It's because it provides substantial individual benefits to those who need it most, those who need that kind of funding. It provides benefits that reverberate to the community writ large, and it provides an avenue of self-betterment to everyone, regardless of your background, regardless, especially if you're an at-risk population. You stand with us. I am very proud to oppose. Thank you.
that speech was kind of weird. It was like a list of things that are good about sports. So I buy that there are things that are good about sports. I buy that they decrease your risk of depression, that they decrease your risk of obesity, even maybe that they make it less likely that you become a criminal. Like, there are lots of things that sports could contribute to our schools. There are lots of other things that could make our schools better, right? Like, if we had personal tutors for every single student, that would make our schools better. If we had libraries the size of Yale's library, which has like 13 million books in it, in every school district, that would make our schools better. If we had jacuzzis and foie gras in the cafeterias, that would probably make our schools better, right? Like, people would be happier, they'd attend school more. That doesn't mean we should do these things. You can't just go, this is good, therefore we should have it in our schools. We have to subject every decision we make about our education to a rigorous cost-benefit analysis, and I don't think we got that out of them. Because you know what else makes it less likely for you to do drugs? You know what else makes it less likely that you'll be depressed or become obese? If you have really good, well-paid teachers in your schools who help you get into college and get a good job. I think that we get a better return on the investment of our tax dollars on our side of the house, and I think that's why you need to vote for us. And I want to make something clear. This isn't just about one student or one district and whether they're better off. This is an issue that plays out on the very macro level. Recognize that the United States is something like 40th in terms of reading and math in OECD countries right now. Recognize that this is an issue that is fundamental to our ability to provide the sort of social safety net that we are committed to providing in this country. It's not just about one district, it's not just about one student. It's about our fundamental values and our long-run economic prosperity and national security. And insofar as those things are true, I don't think we can just go, well, this makes some people happy, it makes some people feel better, it makes some people more healthy, therefore we should spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on it. So he tells you this weird thing. He tells you that it's only 1% of the Anchorage school district budget, so like, that's fine, that doesn't seem like a big deal. You know how many teachers you could hire with 1% of the Anchorage school district budget? Steve Johnson told me this before the debate. 54 teachers. That's a lot of teachers. That would significantly decrease the student-teacher ratios in some classrooms in this district. And that is very, very correlated with your ability to succeed in life. Much more than whether you ran cross-country for 2 years and hated it just because it was the only way you could make some friends. Go ahead. That's what happened to me. Sorry, that's why I'm up here.
So it's good that we agree that these sports are beneficial, but what I find is strange is that you're saying that this is like the only thing that we can cut. There's not other things that we can cut. We would save $1.7 billion if we got rid of standardized testing and acted more like Finland. The schools didn't want to.
So like there are other bad things too, right? Like, that's not a reason we shouldn't get rid of a bad thing, right? Like, if we could also spend the standardized testing dollars on paying teachers better, I think Ceci and I would be okay with that. Fine. Not what this debate is about. So what do we get out of the last speaker? I think we basically get 4 arguments. So the first thing he tells us is that there's this big problem on our side of the house because in the schools, academics and athletics are linked together, but that doesn't happen when you have a club sports model. So first of all, like, I want you to think about the sorts of people who are the coaches at your school. Now, maybe there were a few exceptions to this, but I would be willing to bet that in most cases, the person who was the varsity basketball coach was not the best teacher in your school. I'd be willing to bet that that person was a very good varsity basketball coach and probably taught something like PE and was like the 4th or 5th PE teacher, or like generally not a very good teacher. Like, I recognize that there are exceptions, but I think that what generally happens is that when you're a principal and you want to be well perceived by your community, you want your school to do well at athletics, which means that you're willing to make sacrifices in terms of classroom performance. You're willing to hire people who maybe aren't qualified to be teaching so that they can run your athletic programs, and you're willing to spend more money than you should on these programs. So I don't think the fact that they're linked together in schools is good. I think it's bad, and I think a club model would be much better, because then you would have parents choosing to pay for this, not just telling all parents, you have to subsidize something that 1/4 of the students in your district are doing through your tax dollars. I think that's unacceptable. No, thank you. The next thing he tells us is he reads us a very long list of studies of, like, I feel like I'm on JSTOR or something here, like higher GPA, you earn more money, there's less crime. So first, I don't think he ever demonstrated that there's causation here. I think you need to look to the argument that Cicino gives you that he doesn't give any response to whatsoever. If you have a single mother and need to work after school to support your family, need to watch your kids after school, that is probably correlated with you not making more money in the future, because it probably also means that along with not playing sports, you're not spending as much time working on your homework, you don't have as much time to study, things like that. And here's what Cicino and I would tell you, and I think this is the most important fact you need to recognize about this debate round. Our most important obligation is to these students, because in the United States, unlike virtually any other developed country on earth, we have a huge gap between the academic outcomes of the poorest students in our society, between racial minorities and the rest of society. I think that's an unacceptable thing for to be true in the greatest country on earth. I'm not okay with it. I don't think you should be okay with it either. So insofar as that's the case, I think the question we need to ask ourselves when deciding how to spend money is, what will help these students, the students who are worse off the most? And we know that those students aren't playing sports. We know that those students need more time to study, need better teachers, need smaller teacher-student ratios, and we only get that on our side of the house. Go ahead.
Funding, public funding for these sports is what enables anyone from that at-risk, lower socioeconomic background to participate in these sports. That different with the University of Chicago study, where you take students that already had a criminal record, pair them up with mentorship and competing in sports, and saw those benefits.
But here's the problem, right? For every $1 that we spend on a kid like that who can benefit from having a mentor, we spend $10 on some upper middle class kid with a personal trainer and a club sport team in the off season, because that's the person who actually is going to be most successful in sports, and that's the person who the coaches are going to pay attention to. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't think your success in academics is inversely correlated with your economic wealth. That seems pretty absurd. That's not true about anything else that happens, anything else, any other competitive activity that we do in American society. So insofar as that's the case, what I would say to you is, yes, we want to have mentors on our side of the house, but the people we want to be mentors are teachers or maybe debate coaches, people like that, and we want them to be focused on these students in particular. And you can't get that because you can't just have a sports team that only allows poor kids to play on it. I mean, I guess you could, but that would be kind of weird. I don't think that's a good idea. So normally what would happen in debate round now is, now that I've responded to his arguments, I would respond to the responses he gave to my partner's arguments. Weird thing is, he didn't give any responses to any of them. Which is probably a bad idea. I thought some of the stuff that Cindy said was pretty good. So I just want to remind you about the important arguments he gives you. So first, he tells you that there are a bunch of ways in which these also actively harm the academic environment. Seems like it might be a problem if you're saying these things are always good for the academic environment. Be great to hear a response from Brittany on that. Then he tells us that there's a zero-sum resource cost here, right? Like, if we're not spending this money on sports, then we can spend it on teachers. We can pay them more, or we can hire more teachers. Again, insofar as these things are much more strongly correlated with your life outcomes, with your educational outcomes, we think you should be doing that. But the most important argument that they don't respond to at all is this argument about social justice. The most important people in our society when we're making educational decisions are the ones who don't have parents who can help them, because those are the ones who, in the long run, through the educational system, we can improve, whose lives we can improve. I think that's what we're standing for on Proposition. We're very proud of our folks.
No one likes heels. They do make me shorter, though. Call me a radical, but I think that when we make decisions about our educational system, we ought to make those decisions based on the children that participate in that system and every single child that participates in that system. And I say, if one child is able to participate in high school athletics and feel as if they are being validated in their education and feel as though they are being privileged in their education, then we have an obligation to provide for that child. We have an obligation to provide those opportunities. And that's what Proposition Bench is missing today. They're missing the underprivileged children, those who can't afford club athletics, those who can't afford to drive or have their parents drive them every day after work and pay excessive fees for these club athletics to get all of the benefits that Matt told you today. We think that those benefits are certainly the basis on which we should be deciding whether or not this is a program we should eliminate. That's what we're going to be discussing today. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk to you about 3 points. First, why diversity in the educational standards we use is absolutely imperative. Second, why there's the precedent that this will set for cutting funding from other activities. And third, the underprivileged kids that Matt and I have been talking about, we think was largely just flippantly dismissed on their side of the house. No, thank you. But first, a little bit of deconstruction. Most of it will be weaved in. First, they tell you, look, you're going to be cutting teachers, and that's a problem. Matt gave you a really good POI when Sam was speaking, and he said, we spend $1.7 billion yearly in the nation on standardized testing. We spend $1.7 billion on the failed plan of No Child Left Behind. I think if we can start by cutting somewhere, we ought to cut there before we take away from those outlets that Matt directly told you provide benefits. Secondly, they tell you that kids will be spending time on sports, which is funny because Matt asked a POI at the very top of this debate when he said, well, would you cut all club athletics for students? Would you prohibit students across the board, whether in school or out of school, from participating in athletics? At which point Sasenu said, no, kids can do what they want with their own time. And I think that's a concession on their part, that if our children want to be playing athletics, and if their families agree that they ought to be involved in those sports, that we should allow them to spend their time on those sports, and we should leave it up to those families to decide how it is they designate their time once they go home from school. We think that's important. I'm going to really get into the meat of my material here and just weave in the rest that they said we didn't respond to, which I think most of Matt's material actually did respond to. No, thank you. So first, talking about diversity in education, because what I will tell you and what I imagine everybody in this room will agree with is that children learn differently. That kids can learn visually or audially or physically or in whatever way makes sense to them. We think that because kids learn differently, we must provide the maximum amount of safety nets to catch each and every one of the children that come through our educational system. When certain kids do not feel as though they ascribe to the system of reading, writing, and arithmetic, we must provide something else that will keep them engaged in their educational system, something else that will help them succeed when they're in school. Matt told you in his speech that kids have higher GPAs, they have higher graduation rates, they have higher college acceptance rates when they participate in high school athletics. We think these are the things that are important to make sure that when a child feels like they do not fit in the classroom, that they still fit into the educational system. That's what we provide for them today. Before I continue into that, go ahead.
Wouldn't it probably be preferable if we had resources available with which to, say, hire things like tutors, to identify the needs of each individual student and make sure that they're getting the education that they deserve?
I think regardless of how many tutors you hire and regardless of how many teachers you have and regardless of the kind of testing that you have for kids, there will still be students out there who just don't get it and don't feel like they belong. I am one of those students. I am one of those kids who felt compelled to stay in school and to participate because of theater and because of gymnastics, not because of my writing and my math classes. I'm one of those kids that did not feel like I belonged every time I got a homework assignment. Theater kept me in. Gymnastics kept me in. I imagine many of you would say the same thing about yourselves. We think when those kids are at risk, we absolutely have to provide an outlet for them to feel like they belong and to feel like they can participate in that system. No, thank you. Secondly, on that, what I would say is that we have taken massive leaps towards standardizing education within our school systems. No Child Left Behind was the most ludicrous proposal that has ever been passed for children. No Child Left Behind made sure that students could not succeed. It's a thing that took creativity and the tools for creativity out of teachers' hands and forced them into standardized education. We think when you don't allow for educational systems to provide for things like athletics, that you further eliminate their ability to provide a diversity of education, you further standardize our educational systems. We absolutely cannot let that stand, particularly after witnessing the failure of No Child Left Behind. Moving on. So what does this mean if we allow ourselves to cut athletics from our educational system? What is this going to result in? Not only is it going to result in all of the children that we've already told you about not being able to participate, but it sets a precedent. What this says is when we decide that something does not provide you with the career opportunities that we would like it to, or it does not contribute to the school system that we have standardized by our federal government, that we ought to eliminate it. We think this results in taking away things like our art programs, like our theater programs, like our drama, debate, and forensics programs. These take away from those activities that necessarily provide outlets for children who otherwise would not belong. That's an extension of what I was just saying, that when we set the precedent that cutting athletics is okay, the next step is cutting from our arts department. That's a threat we already face, and it is a threat we cannot accept. Go ahead.
You told us that gymnastics was what kept you in school. I'm just curious, does Alaska have truancy laws?
God, I hope not. Yeah, probably, but I did skip school every once in a while. My mom's over there, she can tell you if you want to ask her about how grounded I was when that happened. I graduated though, and I'm in a master's program now, so hooray. Finally, talking about the underprivileged children that Matt and I have been harping on this whole time, because we think that they're the most important children that are going to be losing out in today's, or if you decide to side with Proposition. Because what Sasenu and Sam told you was that the alternate option that we have for athletics is club athletics. I told you at the top of my speech, I told you in a POI, club athletics are ridiculously expensive. I'm a gymnastics coach now, and the amount of children that I see not being able to compete and on our gymnastics team simply due to the cost and the time commitment is heartbreaking. The amount of children who want to participate, who want to thrive, and who want to feel as though they belong to the athletic community, who are turned away simply because they cannot afford it, should never be allowed to happen. We think that all children deserve to have an opportunity. And since we are not providing sports opportunities and sports scholarships for students to participate in club athletics to the degree that all of our children who are in the lower socioeconomic class ought to be able to receive, and since 8.5% of students in the Anchorage School District live below the poverty line, we cannot take away this opportunity for them to belong to something that Matt already told you is so beneficial. So what I'll tell you today, in conclusion, is do it for the kids.
We come now to that portion of the debate where you'll have the chance to become involved in the discussion. For the next 20 minutes or so, we'll open the mics to those who would like to weigh in on the motion. This tradition, which is drawn from the British House of Commons, is structured in much the same way as the formal debate. We'll open with comments from somebody who wants to speak on behalf of the motion, and then we'll alternate between the proponents and the opponents for about 20 minutes. Each speaker will have 1 minute to make their point, and to be sure that we give as many people the opportunity to speak as we possibly can, we're going to enforce that rule pretty rigorously. At the end of 1 minute, you'll hear a double bell. It sounds like this. That means you should wrap up your comments. At the end of a 15-second grace period following that, the bell will ring continuously until you stop speaking. With that then, I would now like to open the floor to the first speaker from the proposition for a 1-minute floor speech. You can come on up, grab the microphone, and let's give him a round of applause to kick it off.
Of the many things that I'd like to say, or just a few lists, is that athletics only caters to a small group of people. For example, if you are in a wheelchair, how are you going to play football or hockey? It's a very narrow group. And also, football has a very high injury rate, and various other sports do too. And if you blow a knee, you can't play anymore. And suddenly, you're no longer in the equation. What's my point of even existing now? You've given them a hope, you've given them something to reason to live for, and suddenly it's destroyed. I'm pretty sure that is worse than actually not being able to have something so prolific as sports. Second of all, if you want to have people do better in school and so forth, yeah, a bit stuttering here, maybe you could just get amazing teachers. If you want them to come to school, maybe you could have teachers who can engage them. I mean, and teachers who can teach them. I mean, my mom is a Norton Gillingham teacher and teaches lots of students how to read who've got dyslexia. But most teachers won't do that.
Thanks to our first speaker. We'll now hear from somebody from the opposition. Come on up.
Really quickly, can I ask a question to the proposition? Is that allowed?
Not really. We just want to hear from you.
Okay. Because one of the major points I was kind of wondering about for this debate was whether or not the proposition would be for just kind of getting rid of school athletics in general, or making it more of a pay-to-play system, which I see flaws in both systems. First of all, just getting rid of athletics, sort of what the UAA team has talked about before. I'm on the service attendance team, and kind of contrary to what some people say, like I don't play the club sports. I would not consider myself very good. It's something that I enjoy, and I think getting rid of that is not beneficial for many of the reasons that they stated before, which leads us to the option of the pay to play, which again doesn't work because we were talking about the system with the students who cannot pay, and even scholarships would involve some funding, so that's why that system would not work.
Returning now to the proposition, our next floor speaker.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. There's one thing that I want to point out here to make sure that everyone understands exactly what is going on in this debate. We must fully understand that when funds are directed towards students who only use sports as an outlet to slowly survive, that to try to survive in schools where they are pushed towards just getting the lowest GPA of a 2.0, that we must understand that does not make us a better nation. We must understand that if we want to rank ourselves as out of the 16% of 16th ranking of the world standard for our reading stats, that we must fully understand that if we're going to get out of that, we must put forth the effort towards our students, giving them the opportunities to get tutoring and pushing them to have better education and such forth, to have them have better standing so then they do not go into gangs, so they do not become criminals, so they do not become people who do not make our society better. We must understand that these are fundamental reasons why education exists and why we should go for the proposition today. Thank you.
A familiar face for the opposition.
I promise I won't say hockey hater. Hello, everyone. I think something that we need to accept is that everyone's different. Not everyone's academically inclined, not everyone's academically interested. I think the point of athletics at the high school level is that it's a hook, is that it pulls kids in. My mother-in-law happens to be a single mother with a child who is incredibly involved in athletics, and guess what? When you're a single mom with a kid, you want them busy doing athletics, because that means they're not doing other things. I also think we all agree that schools need funding and that there's a certain baseline. There's a minimum level of funding at which point education would suffer. But we also know you can't just throw money at the problem. It's not just about hiring 1,000 teachers, because there's also students, ladies and gentlemen. So you need both. You need a baseline of funding, and I definitely think you need sports to help those who otherwise would simply not be engaged, would have no reason to not get that 2.0 GPA, no reason to at least not drink or do drugs sometimes, and no reason to look forward to the future. Thank you.
Our next proposition speaker.
Hi. Now, I could quite possibly be on the wrong side, just because of a clarity thing at the beginning, but the use of the word competitive becomes very interesting, and in my interpretation and what it seems like is it's especially talking about this interscholastic that draws a lot of funds, but a lot of sports and a lot of clubs at schools approach ideas of intramural sports in which it's very low cost and it provides all of these benefits that the other side is looking for, and it does all of these things that they say are really good, but it does it at a much different level. It's not pushing forth these high competitive situations like club athletics are doing, but rather giving that community, giving that mental health, giving that physical health, and all of these other things. Now, if this lies within the proposition and under not being competitive athletics, that's essentially what we're looking for in athletics without this stress and this push that this competitive athletics is, and then we leave that to the club sports, and it seems like a best of both worlds in my opinion, but that's just me. Thanks.
1 minute to the opposition.
So I think one thing we can all agree on is both sides here today are arguing which one better prepares kids for life in the real world. And the thing that I would like to state to everyone is that sports do that. They provide competition, such as that in the workplace of if you do well, you go further. They provide qualities admirable, such as quick decision-making, teamwork, leadership, things that are applicable in the business world. And that's why sports are so necessary. It doesn't matter whether you play 1 year of track or 4 years of volleyball. The fact is you learn to work with other people, such as that in sports. You learn to work better as a team, which is important in today's world. Thank you.
On behalf of the proposition.
Hello, my name is Sierra. I am a freshman at Diamond High School, and gotta say I've had 3 quarters to get an idea of what high school is. It's a little bit different than middle school. It's fine. But I've been an honor student for my first 3 quarters of high school as well as middle school, and honestly, I don't think my district had much to do with it. I am an honor student because I don't want to screw over future Sierra. And in my opinion, I think that we should do whatever we can to get our districts to push students to not screw over future students. For example, my friends who are not in sports are also not involved in their academics, they're just there. They have no one to really push them. We're claiming that we're pushing our students, but it's a shove. It's not enough. It's not what we need. So sports is, I guess they're great. Sports are nice, but I just think we need more on this side. So yeah.
Our next opposition speaker.
I like her. Good job. I will start by saying that I am her mother, and she's going to kill me. She was indeed grounded for skipping class, and I think I'm going to be grounded next. One of the things I think that... You're welcome. One of the things that I think we need to keep in mind is that high school, middle school, those are times that the kids are trying to find themselves. Identify who they are, where they're going. It's a time of change. Sports helps them try to figure out who they are. It gives people a chance to try different activities. Some of us got to try different sports. Basketball didn't work out for me. Volleyball, not so well. Swimming, I scored. But I got the chance to sample it because I grew up in a very, very poor family. We could not afford to pay for club activities. And it gave me the opportunity to find out where I fit and where I belonged, and it gave me a chance to succeed.
One minute to the proposition.
Hi. So I'd like to readdress the point that the opposition made about, I'd like to talk about social justice, because I think that when you discuss about who can participate, when we talk about who kids who are impoverished or kids who can't afford to spend their time in athletics, you lose sort of, I don't know, because, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, I know what to say. So I think there's I can't really agree that he gave us a whole bunch of statistics saying that people who participate in sports are more likely to go to college to succeed. I think that that's also linked to people who are more middle class and privileged already and available, I think that's correlated, and that people who can play sports are already in that set of people who can already go to college and have a better life. So I think that you're not doing anything to help that lower percentage of the population, that underprivileged class, and I think that in order to help them, we need to direct funding towards tutoring, towards things that aren't quite athletics, and allow the middle class to deal with its need to be athletic on its own. Because I think public funding should go to the most impoverished, because, you know, gotta help them the most. Thank you.
1 minute to the opposition.
Okay. As a white male whose father was a doctor, I understand that in our society, you know, certain folks have advantages over other folks. As the oldest child of 4 whose father died when he was 10, I also understand that it's difficult when you know, kids have single parents, and those parents kind of have to segregate their time in order to, you know, deal with one kid over the other sometimes. I did cross-country skiing, and I did track in high school, and now I'm the head cross-country coach here, as well as one of the track coaches. Over the course of my coaching and as well as my participation in high school sports, you know, in high school I learned kind of what it meant what I had to do to be a leader, how to be a captain, that sort of thing, and I was forced into that role because I wasn't the most outgoing person. As a coach, we make our kids do team goals sometimes, and in cross country, what that's resulted in is we've had rising GPAs from those kids all the years that I've coached. Every year, the team GPA has gone up. So what I would say is, you know, the minimal expenditure on sports that we put in as a district and maybe as a country, especially in those sports that I'm most familiar with, it winds up manifesting itself in a lot of advantages that, you know, we should be more than willing to pay for.
So first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is really hopeful for Anchorage as a community that we actually care about debating things that matter in our community. So congratulations. As part of that, I would like to note that right now in the Anchorage School District, the minimum fee to play any athletics is $175, so it's not really available to the underprivileged families in our communities. The other piece is, I'd like to not have this be a debate at all because our schools have plenty of funding. We have not increased the base student allocation, which is how our schools get funded by each student who attends the school, since 2011, which means that it hasn't even risen for inflation for our state. Our legislature, as you mentioned at the top of the debate, is considering education and base student allocation right now, and I'd like to encourage us all to tell our legislators that giving our schools money so they can continue to pay for athletics and good academics is great policy.
For the opposition.
Hi, everybody. Ooh, that was a lot louder than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so one of the things that was brought up by the proposition in this debate, and some of the POIs that have occurred at this point on behalf of the proposition, was that committing our public funds towards athletics is not going to help people who are underprivileged. And one of the things that the proposition brought up in this debate was the fact that one of the problems that it's not helping underprivileged students is that they have to come home and take care of the younger students, or the younger siblings that they have in their family. But the problem that we see is that not allocating funding towards athletics in our public school systems is not going to solve the fact that we don't have state childcare. If we want to actually help people that are suffering from the fact that they, like students that are suffering from the fact that they cannot actually participate in sports because of family reasons, then we need to look to the state to look for alternative actions rather than unallocating funding towards things that are actually benefiting students that are in our states, or excuse me, in our schools. Because what we can see is that there are real world benefits. The opposition of this debate has given us several different statistics that are showing us actual proven factual evidence about how these sports are actually affecting students. And if children can find a place where they belong, especially in high school, it is vital that we continue to keep that opportunity open for them. So if we actually want to help underprivileged students, then we need to find an alternative way rather than cutting a positive thing. Thank you.
Now a short speech for the proposition.
So my brother does Golden View debate. I've learned a lot about debate, and what Yale said is 1% that can hire 53 more teachers to your addition, and 53 more teachers to our class, 53, it's about 2 to each person, which would mean that's like about 53 more smarter students. And if that happened every year, that's 53 more smarter students every year. And I play sport, and I'm on a competitive team. I'm not being a soccer hater, but I'm not soccer hating, but if I do not finish my homework, I don't go to soccer. I'll finish my homework because that's what I care about.
For the opposition.
I would like to point out something that I don't think has been given enough light. The fact that, for example, debate could be next. We cannot take cuts to important after-school programs such as debate, sports, arts programs, actings, to boost academics because these things are intertwined. A fundamental part of the high school experience, at least for me, are after-school activities. They keep kids interested and allow creative and physical outlet. They allow kids to kind of work out the stress of the day, and they allow kids to find what they are really passionate about. I would also like to ask you this. What is more important in the vast amount of work environments? The acquisition of social and team skills through sports, of working together, or the marginal benefits that would be given through more funding for public school programs? Sports build very important team skills and allow us to kind of learn to work together, which is something that is sadly lacking in today's environments. I mean, yes, our public school system sucks. It's unwieldy, badly funded, and relies far too much on test scores. But school sports are one of the bright spots. They allow kids of all backgrounds to be part of the team and learn valuable skills.
I think it is terrific that we have so many people that want to speak, but we also have some time constraints. So we're going to take 5 more speeches from each side. So if you count back and see that you're not within those 5 speakers, or if that changes your opinion, my apologies, but we do need to move on with the evening and make sure that we give the debaters a chance to wrap up the positions as well. So another speech now for the proposition.
Thank you. I'm glad I got to speak tonight. I'd like to offer a little bit of anecdotal evidence from my own life. I'm a recent graduate, recent as in the last 2 years, from Chugiak High School here in ASD. And when I was in high school in my junior year, I wanted my school to offer Calculus 2, which is a more advanced calculus class. I met lots of opposition from our administration at the high school. I had to go and collect signatures from people who would be willing to attend this class. I had to talk with multiple counselors, assistant principals. It took a lot of work. However, when our riflery team wanted new rifles, not to replace broken ones, but simply an improvement on our current ones, they got funding almost immediately. It was extremely difficult for me to get this Calculus 2 program offered. Reasons being from the administration that there weren't enough students or there wasn't enough support. When I did successfully get it offered at my high school, we ended up having 20 students show up and take this. And isn't that more beneficial to getting into college than participating in a sport? Having an advanced mathematics course. That looks great on an application to a college. Thank you.
For the opposition.
Wow. Look at this place. Go ahead, take a minute and look around. This place is magnificent. It's luxurious, and it looks expensive. And we've been talking a lot about money tonight. I have a few points that I wanted to bring up. How do we know that money and funding spent on, funds not spent on athletics are being put towards academic performance, improving academic performance? How do we know that we're not just buying more fancy auditoriums? This is beautiful, but I think that there are bigger things that need funding. How many teachers or tutors could the value of this auditorium buy? Also, how do we know that academic performance is improved when athletics are not? So it seems like the system into which these funds are poured is not completely airtight.
Our next speaker on behalf of the motion.
Thank you. I have my own personal opinions coming into this, but I'd like to address a few things just as far as within the scope of this debate today. One of them was brought up already. It's the pay to play, which is to say that we're not saying that all varsity athletics or all competitive athletics in school are free, because they're certainly not, especially in the ASD. Certainly there are waivers, and yeah, it's a much lower cost than club fees, so I'll let it slide. But the next 2 points are things I can't really let slide based on the evidence I've heard. First being inclusion of physical elements in classrooms. Certainly there are a lot of benefits to learners who learn differently, kinetic learners who learn more from sports or from physical interaction, but those are benefits that have been proven to be received by students who have classrooms whose teachers incorporate a little bit more physical activity in the classroom, and they get those same benefits, but they're not using the money on sports or the time. Which to me is not only very beneficial to the students, but is more beneficial to sports because you're not secluding them and saying you can learn your way out when you're in a sport, but that everyone can learn well in the classroom together. The next one has to do a lot with, this point that's been brought up a lot is kind of in contention so far, as far as students who maybe are underprivileged and they don't have the time to go to certain sports, they don't have the time to go to athletic sports, but maybe club sports are really expensive, and yet no amount of not having to pay a fee for club sports is going to get students who don't have the time to be able to do varsity sports in school. Time is not money, as nice as we like to think that it is. Thank you.
Hi, I'm a middle school student, and one thing that I think we should all value in society right now is responsibility. And sports is one way that you can get responsibility. But as the proposition side stated, that people who cannot participate in sports because of engagement with taking care of siblings and family and having a single parent, I think that this taking care of siblings also gains responsibility. And being in a sport is not the only thing that can help responsibility. But people in sports, people who take care of siblings can also do this. And people who don't get to participate in sports because of having to take care of a sibling actually are making a conscious decision to not do it. So, thank you. That was
Another 1 minute to the proposition.
Okay, so as the Yale representative stated, sports in high school provide a lot of benefits. So many I don't even have to talk about. But the fact of the matter is, as a whole, America is slipping in education. We're slipping fast, very, very fast. So when they look at these budgets and they see $20,000 for school trips to go for a football or basketball tournament, they think we can put that into our school system to make us have better schools. So really, I guess I belong more in the middle here, because it's not so much about supporting the school systems as it is the amount of money that they put into it and the amount of return they're seeing on that compared to the amount of return that the schools are giving them. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Oh my gosh, is anybody else high in here? Okay, so first I'd like to state the fact that there are many students out there who do sports, and there are some of them who even do it to pursue it as a career. And so if we don't invest our public funding into these athletic sports, you're not only taking away their right as a student, but you're also taking away their chances to make a living in life. I mean, there are many different ways that you can, go to college and you can make a living for yourself that doesn't involve good grades. Another point I'd like to state, even though that's sort of why I'm not even in this debate, but there are many students out there who just go to school just for the enjoyment of sports. And if they don't have that, then it's gonna take away their sense of going to school. And so if you don't invest money into athletic programs, then you're taking away their education pretty much. And I'm pretty sure none of us here want that to happen, am I right? Thank you.
On behalf of the proposition.
So for the past 25 years, I've been teaching for the Anchorage School District. 21 of those devoted to our Title I students. And here's an unknown fact. If you go out for a high school sport in the Anchorage School District, unless you've played Cook Inlet soccer from the time you were 5, or unless your parents have paid for you to go to Northern Lights Swimming Club, or unless your parents have paid for private tennis lessons in the summer, you don't make the teams in high school in the Anchorage School District. This is why we need to have a balance and why we need to focus on those kids in those lower socioeconomic schools and why we have to give them opportunities that are greater than athletics, because athletics is not necessarily going to be their ticket in the Anchorage School District, but their smarts and their critical thinking and their thoughtful hearts are the things that are going to get them through, because unless their parents have had the money to pay for private athletic sports, Midnight Sun Volleyball, I could go on and on. Anyway, thank you.
The floor is yours.
Okay, I'm just here to make a statement on behalf of the cutting funding for the athletics. I think it really gives students and children like me a slim chance of actually succeeding. And there, I would like to introduce myself. I'm the poster child for disadvantaged kids, okay? So I don't have parents, I don't have none of that. It's just the fact that I did love sports, and it gave me something to be like, oh, this is what I have to do. It gave me something to do. It gave me a reason of being. I'm not doing sports today, no, but I have learned a lot of life lessons while being in sports. I learned how to deal with people. I learned how to deal with people I don't like. You gotta pass them all of that. You learn a lot of good life lessons. And then I don't agree with the whole, if we give more money to the teachers, we're gonna have better teachers. That does not make one bit of sense to me. And if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. So with that, it's just like, you know, a teacher is going to be whatever, you can't tell somebody what to do. Whatever type of teacher the teacher wants to be, that's the teacher they're going to be. So don't take it out on the athletics. Keep it going. Make sure you think of me when you make your decision.
Our last floor speech for the proposition.
I think both sides have missed the point of the social justice argument. The vast majority of professional sports players in this country are minorities. The vast majority of our basketball and football and baseball teams are minorities. And these are the role models for minority kids in school. How are these kids playing a game in college? They want that sports scholarship. That's why they're in these teams. As a white male with middle-class parents, I got an education scholarship. I went to a religious institution. I didn't care about sports. I didn't use it. We are spending money creating a system that tells these minority kids, be fast, be strong, you will succeed. But it's 1 in 10,000 that succeeds. That is not social justice. This is teaching kids they have a chance when they're doomed to fail.
And I'd like to commend the teacher who talked about balance, and I think that's why we need to address this proposition the way it is. I speak in two different points of view. One is a teacher. When I became a teacher, I learned about the affective and the cognitive domain. The cognitive domain is the reading and the writing, the teaching the subjects. The affective is teaching a student to be out in a community, to work together with others. It's what we as teachers have to do to make a well-rounded student. Now, as a parent of 2 kids, I also want to speak to the proposition. One was competitive, one was not. They both went to this institution, East High. One played on a championship basketball team, was very competitive. And he got his needs met. He did become a more rounded individual. The other one was not competitive. He was on the ski team, the cross-country team. He met kids from all over every place in the district, and he learned how to deal with people to be successful later on.
I want to offer my most sincere appreciation and invite you to join me in giving another round of applause to all those who spoke. It takes no no small measure of courage to stand up before a crowd this size and speak your mind, but fundamentally it is what is required of a democracy like ours. Continue to do so, continue to engage, and continue to speak your mind at every available opportunity on these issues that are so critical to us. To close out the debate tonight, we are going to invite each of the teams to give one 5-minute rebuttal speech. We're going to start with the opposition, because they are the ones that are suggesting that we should not make a change. So we'll start with the opposition, and we'll provide for the proposition, who is proposing that we make this change, the final word. So at this point now, I'd like to open the floor. Oh, wait, before I do, I want to make sure that you notice that we're going to put the poll back up. This is our closing poll for the debate. You will see a series of codes there. Those codes are different than the codes that we use for the pre-debate poll. So if, while you're listening to these 2 5-minute rebuttal speeches, you come to some certainty in your position, by all means use that opportunity to text your opinion in, and once we're done with both of these rebuttal speeches, we will reveal the results of your audience voting at that point. So feel free to go ahead and text your votes in at this point. With that, then, I would like to invite a member of the opposition to the floor to close their position in a 5-minute summary speech. Hear, hear.
I told you at the top of my last speech, and I'll tell you again, that if we can benefit the children in our school districts, we absolutely must ensure that we provide the kind of funding that will continue to provide for those benefits. I still stand by that, and when I go home today, I will still stand by that measure. Matt told you in his speech, and this is what I'm going to continue to elaborate on, is that there are numerous benefits that come from participating in high school athletics that I think both sides of the house and anybody in this room can agree are provided. What I think is funniest is that our government bench will tell you that we do benefit some people, but it's only the middle-class kids, to which I say, A, that's not true, and B, they concede that there are benefits from playing in high school athletics. So we say if that's true, we absolutely must ensure that it can continue. So I'm going to give you 3 quick points of summary of what happened in today's debate and why you should continue to stand in opposition of cutting funding from activities that provide for our kids and provide for our future. First, I'm going to talk about the benefits. This is what Matt told you. He said, look, there are personal and societal benefits that come from allowing our children to participate in high school athletics. Looking at personal benefits, kids' mental health improve, their physical health improves. These are things that we're talking about that will last them for a lifetime. Being able to provide for your mind and provide for your body are the kinds of things that we absolutely must ensure our children are able to do. High school athletics can do that, and we must provide for that. Then he tells you that it provides for their academic growth and their academic success, now something that nobody contested here, that some kids are graduating at higher rates because they participate in athletics, that our graduation rates are higher, kids are getting into colleges, kids are graduating colleges and are getting paid more when they go into their careers. We had a bunch of floor speeches on this side, the better side I'll add, that kids feel, or like people who participated in high school athletics for our school district feel as though they succeed more in the business arena. We think these are the things that are important when we're talking about how we allocate our public funding. We don't think things like standardized education and standardized testing is important. We don't think exuberant administrative costs are important. But the way that children feel after they leave our school district is absolutely what is important today. Then he tells you that there's civic benefits, that there's less crime. Kids feel as though they belong to a team and they know how to interact with the team. And we heard many stories of that from you, the speakers on our floor today. We think these are things that we absolutely must consider when we're talking about how we spend our money. Secondly, what kinds of kids are we serving and what educational safety nets do we provide? Because what I told you, and I think a lot of you agreed with me that No Child Left Behind sucks, is that we cannot lose diversity in education and we cannot lose creativity in education. We cannot lose the safety nets of catching those kids who are academically gifted and who are academically challenged. Those kids who are academically interested and academically disinterested. We cannot lose the safety nets that catch each and every every one of those kids because we've already stripped away so many. We have so many children who feel as though they are not succeeding because we take away the tools for them to feel like they can do that. Taking away athletics is one more safety net. That's at least one more child, if not thousands, that participate in the Anchorage School District that lose out because we want to better allocate our funds away from our children and towards I'm not sure what. I'm not sure where they expect that money to go except for to more teachers, which we think that we can cut costs elsewhere. So we think we get more educational safety nets, but most importantly, we link those safety nets and those athletics to the education of each and every child that participates in that activity, something that club athletics cannot do, and club athletics does not do, because club athletics do not care about the success of the children in the same way that the science teacher who's teaching the cross-country running team as well will care. They don't care about that student's GPA in the same way that the school districts will. That's what we think is important, is that we link education to something that is so beneficial, something that everybody here agrees with me is so beneficial. Finally, how do we serve all of the kids in our district instead of just some of the kids in our district? Because what we tell you is that 8.5% of students in our district, just in the Anchorage School District, live below the poverty line. These are children who cannot afford to go to club athletics, who cannot afford to access the same benefits that these other children might be able to. And keep in mind, these children can also not afford tutors and cannot afford to be studying with their parents who are working 2 or more jobs. We think these are the kids that must have somewhere to go after school, that must have somewhere to feel like they belong and feel like they are learning. That is what today's motion will take away from them. If you side with cutting funding from athletics, you side with cutting away opportunities for children to succeed. You side with setting a precedent of taking away activities that allow children to feel like they belong. We think that is unacceptable. So what is the message we send when we, quote, remove the value of athletic activity in our academic systems? We think we remove the value of children who otherwise would feel like they do not belong in our academic setting.
Side opposition tells us, ladies and gentlemen, that we should fund athletics as a means of remedying the inadequacies of a broken educational system. What we tell you on our side of the house is we should take that funding and use it to fix that system. There are 3 issues of significance in today's debate. First, the quality of the instruction that we offer our students. Second, the extent to which we can include and account for the needs of the most underprivileged in our communities. And finally, the cultural values that we instill in our students through the education system. I'm going to explain to you how in every one of these respects, we best meet their needs by taking away funding from high school athletics. First, look to the question of educational quality, because what do they tell you on the opposition? That well, it doesn't really matter that we have funding for high school sports because we also waste money on things like No Child Left Behind. What do we tell you? Cut that too! But guess what? That's not necessarily enough. What we think is that in addition to cutting funding for things like No Child Left Behind, it's probably a good thing to avoid wastage such as this. That's not an argument, that's just another good thing that we can do in addition to Sam and my own our advocacy. But what else do they tell you? That it's a good thing to have athletics in high schools because that keeps kids involved who would otherwise feel like they aren't learning from their teachers. But as was explained by one of our veteran teachers previously during the floor speeches, what helps get these kids involved is things like tutors in classrooms that they can all have access to, not systems that are privileged such as high school athletics. Moreover, at the point where we can do things on our side of the house, like hire teachers who actually account for the needs of each student because they don't have 50 to look after in each class, we better achieve those students' needs as well. Furthermore, look to the kind of academic participation that they got on their side of the house. It isn't, by and large, students succeeding or working to their best ability, but it's students staying involved on the margins, students just scraping by and passing so they can keep playing sports. What we tell you is that at the point that school districts can only offer that to those students, they aren't doing enough. It's not enough to keep them in the schools. What we have to do is ensure that they're in the schools and actually learning to their maximum extent. To say that all they can do is play football and that we can just hope to keep them in the classrooms is to do those children, ladies and gentlemen, a disservice. on our side of the house, we help ensure that we have enough funds to not only attract more teachers to the profession, but ensure that the teachers who do get into the profession aren't invited more and more to burnout because they're underpaid, don't have books to teach their kids with, and are teaching classes far beyond what they should be teaching. It is only through measures such as these we can ensure that children are actually learning. But what else matters? The question of equality, because on their side of the house, what they've told you over and over again is that it's bad for kids to only have the option of club sports because club sports require you to devote financial resources and devote other resources in order to participate. First, as we explained to you, the problem is that even when you don't have to devote financial resources, and as someone explained during floor speeches, apparently in Anchorage you do, to participate in varsity high school athletics, you still have to participate in terms of time, and that's something that far too many kids simply do not have the ability to do. If you have to do something, like look out for your little siblings, if you have to do something like help put food on the table for your family, I'm sorry, but it's very unlikely that you're going to have the time to participate and take advantage of things like high school athletics, even if you grant that they are beneficial to students. What we think is that instead of advocating for and instead of funding these sorts of programs, we should instead devote our resources to things that every kid can use. Things like tutors in the classrooms, things like books in the classrooms, things like, for God's sakes, ensuring like the classrooms aren't crumbling around our students' heads. Those are all things that we can better obtain on our side of the house by cutting this funding. The last question is, I think, the one that side opposition today has addressed in the least detail. That is, the issue of what kind of values, what sort of culture we create in our schools when we fund athletics and when we do not. What did I tell you throughout my speech? What did Sam advocate further in an argument that went completely unresponded to by the opposition? That we think it's very problematic that kids in schools today are being told by the rest of society, are being told throughout the popular culture that all that matters is the body, that all that matters is monetary success, that all that matters is everything but your mind, is everything but intellectual attainment, particularly kids of color, particularly kids from lower socioeconomic conditions. What we think is that it is of critical importance to have a space in which they get other messages. Messages that don't tell them, yeah, you should stick around because of football, not because we think we can actually make a worthwhile student out of you. We think that by taking away funding from athletics and devoting it to other ends, such as the arts, such as better instruction for these kids in other respects, we can help create that space. All of the lessons that they talk about, lessons of competition, lessons of discipline, lessons of teamwork, are things that can be learned in other spaces than football, than basketball, than running, in spaces that actually provide them with other schools, spaces such as the arts, spaces such as the classroom, which is where learning should begin, if not end. It is because we make that classroom an appropriate place for our students to operate, and we stand in proud proposition today.
I would like to offer my congratulations and thanks to both of these terrific teams for doing such a good job with this motion tonight. But ultimately, you're going to tell us who you think did the best job. So if we could return to the pre-debate poll and get a sense of where we were before this all started. There it is. So we had 53% opposed to the motion. We had 36% in favor of the motion. If we could now take a look at the post-debate poll. And before we reveal, I'll give one more opportunity for anybody who has not yet texted in their opinion. The results. Oh! Congratulations, I think, go to, if my math is right, 53 stayed at 53, 36% in favor, went up to 42%. I have to call this one for Yale, folks. Congratulations. Thanks again to the debaters, thank you to all our sponsors, and thank you most importantly to all of you for coming out and supporting discourse such as this. Remember that the best debates are not those that conclude discussions, but that begin them. Please don't forget to continue to engage your discourse with your neighbors, your friends, and your families. Keep talking. Thank you.